Before I begin, those of you who know me know that I like to get straight to it, but the rabbit hole of lies is so deep to where truth doesn't just add up, it multiplies itself. There are so many lies that the truth, when you understand truth, you can't even deal with truth adding up. It's just a multiplication factor that begins to exist because the rabbit hole of lies is so deep. I mean, it is deep as hell. And I mean that literally. I would love to promote reparation. I have promoted reparation, asked for reparation, talked about nothing but reparations. But the rabbit hole of lies is so deep to where the only thing I can ask for, spiritually speaking, is civil rights for all people. And why do I say this? Is because this so-called system of racism is a smokescreen because it is classism. Racism is classism, and it was created by England and the Romans. I mean, we need to live in a classless society. But if we paid reparations, it would be the beginning of the destruction of the class system. And I say this because white people in America are commoners. You are commoners. You do not have a white privilege card. You are commoners. You are second class citizens. Underneath you are the people the Asians. Underneath the Asians are Latinos, and at the bottom are, I would like to say, African Americans, but then African Americans, we just kind of, we just float up and down. I mean, you have billionaire and millionaire African Americans because of our intelligence and superiority. We can cross through the system of classism and become part of the ruling class. An example of this is Obama. But with this being said, we still must understand that the United States is a republic, and it is ran by oligarchs who don't always get along. Now, the Republican Party is the party of the oligarchs. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. To the republic. The Constitution does not say, the Pledge of Allegiance does not say to the democracy for which it stands. It states to the republic. The founding fathers of the United States were oligarchs, Republicans. And they wanted to, and some who had raised themselves up from being commoners wanted to be part of the oligarchy and separate themselves from the commoners. So understand this. Racism is a class society. Racism is a class society that is supposed to be based on race. But if you make so much money, you can cross into a higher class. Trump is cutting off the American dream. And if you are not a part of the oligarchy or a servant of the oligarchy, when Trump gets finished with you, with us, you will only be commoners. And we will all be treated equally as subservient. We will all be indentured servants. That's what Trump is creating. The oligarchs and the indentured servants. The oligarchs are going after farmers' land. They are going after farmers' land. And farmers will tell you that they are being put out of business by Donald Trump. Small business people are being put out of business by stores like Walmart, Sam's Club, that are owned by oligarchs, the rich. They're putting the mom and pop stores out of business and preventing upward social mobility, which means the American dream no longer exists. Republicans are about money. Money and creating a class society. Democracy, Democrats, they want to create a society where white people have white privilege cards. Republicans have never cared about democracy. They grew up as oligarchs. They don't care about what race you are. Only thing they care about is establishing and keeping their positions as the rich versus the poor. Democracy is about unions. Republicans have always been against unions because unions will create what? A classless society where there is upward mobility. Now follow closely. This is where truth is getting ready to multiply and divide. It's getting ready to get crazy. Bacon's rebellion, lasted from 1676 to 1777. This is where commoners who were black and white, indentured servants, and some were slaves, black and white, had an uprising against the oligarchs who were from England, who financed the trips to America. They were outnumbered by the indentured servants. The indentured servants were going to take over. Why? Because they were given land that was almost unfarmable, whereas the oligarchs were getting the best land and were the people collecting the money from the indentured servants. Bacon was a black man, and the reason why his name was who was mixed race, and the reason why they called his last name was Bacon was because he loved to eat bacon. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But guess what? Names had a meaning in those days. There were names like Native Americans had names like Running Bear, Lone Wolf, names like this. Names meant something. They were symbolic. On a side note, if your last name is Wilson, then your father was more than likely white. And his son was called Wilson to identify him with his father. If you were white and your name was Robert and you had a son, then he became Robert's son. Understand this. People couldn't read and write in those days. People from England could not read and write. So they just used words. And so Wilson became Wilson. William's son became Wilson. Robert's son became Robertson. Now, probably, if you were black, you were a Moor, and if you had a son who was light complexion, then he would be called Morris' son. You have a president who married a mulatto woman, Calvin Coolidge, and her last name was Moore. She was black. See, names had a meaning back in those times. Now understand this. Bacon was a light-skinned black man who could pass for white. And what the oligarchs said is that anybody that is of a white complexion and are not of a dark complexion are one of us. So they gave them white privilege cards, which meant you will no longer have to be slaves. We're just going to enslave black people. That is classism being changed into, that is classism being morphed into racism. Racism is morphed classism. There was a saying that the sun never stops shining on the British Empire. And so that is why you have classism in India. India is more racist toward black people, dark-colored Indians, than the racism that existed in America. Because they called the people untouchables and said they couldn't even walk on the roads. But that is racism from the English, which started in Rome. So, if the United States wanted to pay reparations, it would be hard, because a lot of white people know that their great-great-grandparents were what? Were white. If they came to the United States during the 1600s. If they came to the United States during the 1600s, they were commoners as well as black and white people were commoners. If you didn't have money, you were a commoner. And understand this, the first president of the United States was a black man. And he helped to finance the Civil War. You see, like I'm telling you, man, the rabbit hole of lies is so deep. It's deep. And you have to be an intellectual. And you have to be committed to truth to see how deep this hole is. This hole is deep. I mean, the lies are crazy. I mean, because when you look at it, look at the Republican Party. The Republican Party fought against the oligarchs because they fought against what? Slavery. And slavery, when slavery was eradicated, it allowed Caucasians to get jobs. Because before then, you could just buy a slave and you didn't need to pay wages to a white person. And then after slavery, what did the oligarchs do? They made white children work in factories. Instead of going to school, white children had to work in factories to support their families. And the biggest ripoff is, and the funny thing about it is that white people are trying to protect some of the worst jobs in the world and are against, and somehow Reagan has turned them against, Ronald Reagan has turned them against unions. And unions is what prevented their children from having to work. Unions gave them Social Security and everything else. And and to have a white people, to have a white privilege card, do things that are not in their best interest. All because they want to be a white privilege card. They think that the white privilege card will allow them to achieve a different class status. But that white privilege card, it allows you to get away with shooting and harming black people, but it does not raise your value in society. It doesn't raise your value in society. You are just being used as a pawn between the oligarchs and the common people, and you are the common people keeping yourself down. Up to the 1920s, we had segregated towns and cities. And the black towns and cities were exceeding the oligarchs' cities. They thought that segregation was advantageous to white people because they started believing their own lies, that black people were inferior. But white Wall Street in New York was actually black Wall Street, as was Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And black people had 400 black banks. And these banks were used to finance black inventors. And they sold stock for a penny. And white people also purchased those stocks. And this helped to create the Roaring Twenties. When the United States government bombed Black Wall Street, bombed those black cities and towns, and buried them underneath lakes, the United States went into a depression and recession in the 1930s. How do you think that depression started? By the destruction of black capitalism in the United States and the restructuring of American capitalism to benefit the white oligarchs. And at this time, the president at this time was Warren G. Harding. And his mother was black. And Warren G. Harding was a Democrat. And he believed in socialism. He was the one that started paying it wasn't called the Veterans Administration, but he was paying veterans benefits. He was also in support of integration and helping minorities. Unfortunately, he was controlled by the Ohio Gang, a group of rich oligarchs who put him into office, and he had to acquiesce to them. But like I say, truth, when you understand truth, it starts to multiply. It doesn't just add up, it multiplies. And then what happens when it multiplies? Your cup runneth over. Your cup runneth over. My cup runneth over. From all these years of study, and it all started with studying spirituality. And when you study religion, you see how all these things fit and add up. And only thing, white people are voting against themselves when they vote Republican, because Trump has proven his point. Trump has proven his point that he does not care about white people. And then you have the governor and the Republicans who run Ohio saying that no more working at home. You have to start going to work. So in other words, white people who did not have to travel from the suburbs to downtown in the winter will now have to travel downtown to work in office buildings. And these are two-parent households. White people had the household where the father, a lot of them worked in construction, and his wife could stay home and work from home, doing secretarial type stuff. Now she has to go to work, which means that what are their kids going to do when their kids, and that's going to usually be an hour both ways. So what are they going to do when their kids get out of school? Who's going to be home? You see, the gig is up. And Trump talking about being a dictator. Dictators don't answer to anyone. They do what they want to do. And Trump is all about making money. And who he exploits to make money, he doesn't care. And this goes back to before there were unions and 5-year-old children were working. That is make America great again. Make America great again for who? For the oligarchs. Understand this. And when the Republicans say that women going to work again, no more working at home, is good for the economy, whose economy are they talking about? Because they are telling you that we're going to take money out of your pockets, ruin your family's stability for the economy. Now, if you are a part of the economy and they're doing things that are good for the economy, then it would benefit you. But this so-called economic idea is going to take money out of the pockets of Caucasians. It will not affect black people. You see, Biden affected black people when he started bringing immigrants into the country and giving them housing in black communities and giving them Social Security and all this old kind of stuff that they did not work for. And then have the audacity to tell people that Social Security is going broke. Or they just took all the money out of it, just like they took all the money out of the robbed the postal system. But you see how I'm spreading out here? Because my cup runneth over, because truth multiplies. And when you live in truth, you see what is going on. Spirituality is the ability to reason. It is non-emotional love. Spirituality is non-emotional love, and it is based on truth and reasoning. But that's going into another story. And now I'm just traveling all over the place because I'm starting with Bacon's Rebellion, and I've gotten to this point because truth just multiplies. It just multiplies, and my cup runneth over. Like, subscribe, and to be perfectly truthful with you, I'm trying to get into my spiritual studies, because that's all I want to talk about is spirituality, and to get rid of classism. Because once we get rid of classism, then God's chosen people can bring Caucasians out of the wilderness and create a democracy again in the United States, the same way we created a democracy in the 1920s when we had the Roaring Twenties. That was a product of African Americans destroying the oligarchs' system of class and creating a classless society. I don't even know what I'm going to name this video now. But anyway, keep liking and subscribing. Talk to you all later. Have a blessed day.